news. Now, we'll put that in context. What does that really mean for inflation? And we'll do that on India development debate later on tonight. But of course, it's an important story considering high prices is something that the government is contending with, that consumers by and large in India have to face. Turning our attention outside, there in the UK, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stepped down as the leader of the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson, of course, intends to carry on as the Prime Minister of UK until a new leader is appointed by the Conservative Party. But until yesterday, the British Prime Minister had been rather adamant that he is not going to resign, despite those dozens of resignations that came from his own government. The events were set into motion when the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, resigned, citing a lack of trust in his leadership. And after that, there were dozens of ministers and officials who started resigning from the British government, and all of them serving under Boris Johnson. Let's get perspective on this. The Times Network's Danish Khan is joining us from London with all the latest updates from there.
Well, the state of British politics pretty much reflects what's going on in the Palace of Westminster. As you can see right behind me, it requires massive repairs, and that's what is going here in the Palace of Westminster, which is exactly what's happening in British politics as well. Boris Johnson has made that announcement, which was long overdue, but what next? Well, it is going to be a huge churning within the Tory party, nothing short of a civil war, if I may say so. Several leaders will be putting their hat in the ring to be the next Tory leader. Foremost among them will be Rishi Sunak, who has just resigned as the Chancellor of the Exchequer on the very first day, and which started the flood of resignations that struck Downing Street and Boris Johnson tremendously. At last count, around 50 ministers have resigned, including parliamentary private secretaries, saying that they do not have confidence in Boris Johnson. The Tory party will now come together to elect a new leader, but till then, Boris Johnson will continue to remain in Downing Street, which is again a prospect not entirely to the liking of the Tory backbenchers.
All right, that's our perspective from Danish Khan, our reporter who was there at in London, getting us the inside story as to how we've led to this situation where the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is all set to resign as Prime Minister now that he's resigned as the leader of the Conservative Party. But let's also put this in context, the rise and seeming fall of Boris Johnson. Let's turn to this report that my colleague Gulshan Sharma has filed.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
The poster boy of Brexit and controversies, Boris Johnson's downfall is as stunning as his ascension to the top post. It was only 3 years ago that the former London mayor became Conservative leader and the Prime Minister of Britain. At the time, Boris Johnson said he would deliver Brexit and energize the country. Now it seems his stay at Downing Street has energized his opponents as Johnson kept battling scandal after scandal. Even his primary project, Brexit, remains embroiled in the Northern Ireland saga.
I regret not to have been successful in those arguments, and of course it's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
The latest scandal to hit Johnson revolves around lawmaker Christopher Pincher, who Johnson appointed as Deputy Chief Whip in February. It was alleged that Johnson was aware of allegations against Pincher and still promoted him. What followed was an exodus of ministers and top aides never seen before in recent political history of Britain. But Johnson is not the one to stay away from controversies. In fact, he was known to court controversies and yet emerge unscathed, with an innate ability to carry on without any sense of shame or embarrassment. Only recently, he got involved in what was termed as Partygate. Johnson earned the ignominious distinction of being fined by cops while being the Prime Minister. He was severely criticized in Parliament for his lockdown parties, but he vowed to make changes and continue. Johnson was also forced to apologize to Queen Elizabeth for partying in Downing Street on the eve of her husband, Prince Philip's funeral in April 2021. But then Johnson never cared much for convention. Boris Johnson also made headlines after getting the Downing Street flat refurbished. Johnson's pandemic response also came under scrutiny, even as he himself battled a severe bout of disease. The political turmoil in the United Kingdom has come at a time when the country has emerged as one of the pillars of Ukrainian resistance against Russia. The cost of living is high, energy prices are up, and the inflation is at a 40-year high, almost touching double digits. UK's ship will most likely weather the storm, but Johnson's legacy and scandals will leave ripples for years to come. With Gulshan Sharma, Vikram Oza, ET Now.
Boris Johnson's legacy as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, of course, as difficult as it may be to actually analyze, let's understand it a little better with Senior Journalist Smita Gupta. She's here to put in context the implications of Boris Johnson stepping down. Firstly, thanks for joining us, Smita. But how did Boris Johnson, according to you, paint himself into a corner like this? Of course, he resisted and eventually caved in, but he's known to fight through volatile times. How different was it really this time? Because it's a saga of scandals that we see as a legacy that he leaves behind.
Well, Boris Johnson, of course, was known, as you said, for his ability to sort of fight back and to sort of occupy center stage. But he was also this public school boy, who was, had this great sense of entitlement, and at the same time, this ability to sort of ignore all the scandals around him. You can call him, I think he was basically careless. And as your correspondent just pointed out, there were three scandals. First, there were the illicit parties in Downing Street when the whole country was under lockdown. The second was his attempt to use a Tory party donor to finance the costly refurbishment of his apartment. And the third was to promoting a conservative lawmaker with a history of sexual misconduct. But simultaneously, there was an economic crisis in the country. So taken together, finally, I think the Conservative Party felt that he was becoming a liability to them. I mean, there have been hints over the last so many months that he should step down. But obviously, he is temperamentally not somebody who just steps down. It's only after the large-scale resignations, a wave of resignations within the Conservative Party that have forced him to take the step that he has.
But
so
perhaps, Smita, we may not have seen the last of Boris Johnson just yet. But as part of the legacy is how he came across as a poster boy for Ukrainian resistance. He certainly did as an ally of the US in their stance against Russia. What happens to that now that Boris Johnson is no longer going to be the Prime Minister of the UK?
Well, it is for his successor, whoever that may be, to take on that task. See, the point is that Boris Johnson was also, let's face it, a very successful politician, despite the fact that he was not a very, your everyday politician. He did win a huge majority in the last election, on which he was banking. He thought he had the support of the people. But finally, the party felt that he was going to lose them. The next election was earning them a disrepute, and the economy was not doing well. So there were two things happening. So it is now for his successor. It's for the Conservative Party to choose a successor who will be able to play that role in the international arena.
Right. And Smita, looking at the possibilities right now within the Conservative Party, who do you think has the biggest chance? Who are the front runners, according to you, who can take on that mantle? Because the leadership shifts in the UK, there have been quite a few. And now with this latest exit against this saga of scandals, leaves a room that is going to be tough to fit at a time that the world is also facing the prospects of a recession.
It is very interesting. To me, what is most interesting is that of the half a dozen names that are being taken in Britain right now, 3 people are those whose origins are not in the United Kingdom. There's Rishi Sunak, an Indian, and as we know, Mr. Narayan Murthy's son-in-law, who was a chancellor of the Exchequer and who led the revolt in a sense. His was the first resignation. Then the current chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadam Zadavi, who is whose origins are in Iraq. He's a Kurd from Iraq. And the third is has Pakistani origins, Sajjad Javed, who has been both Home Secretary and Health Secretary. So it also tells you something about Britain, that 3 people who don't have, I mean, I cannot imagine this happening in India. Here that 3 people out of, say, 6 or 7, the names that are being taken are people who are like first or second generation, Britishers. Now, both, if it is a question of the economy, obviously Rishi Sunak is considered a front runner. So is Nadam Zadavi. He's also, was appointed as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But it could be somebody else also. It will be for the Conservative Party to figure out who, I'm sure in the coming couple of months, till the leader is actually chosen. It'll also be, it'll depend also on how each of these people who are in the running are able to gather support from within the party.
Within the Conservative Party. That remains to be seen, and we'll be watching that space very closely. Smita, thanks very much for joining us with your take on the politics that we are seeing in the United Kingdom. Now, we are looking at the exit of Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister. He's already resigned as the leader of the Conservative Party there. We take a quick break now on this edition